Hello, thanks for tuning into my second presentation on Boeing. I'm Holton Jepson. I think I gave too much of an introduction last time and I ended up running the video way too long. So I'm going to start you off with the SWOT analysis this time and let you be surprised by the rest of the presentation. So let's get started. Boeing is the world's largest manufacturer of commercial and military aerospace machinery, in case you missed my last one presentation. The amount of employees that Boeing has in the United States is throughout 150 other countries is approximately 160,000. They have been successful in consuming many of the manufacturers, including Piasecki, Helicopter, and McDonnell Douglas, to make them very diverse in the flight manufacturing area. The following SWOT analysis, we'll start with strengths. We'll illustrate what strengths and weaknesses you'll find internally in the Boeing company and the external opportunities and threats. So the largest strength that Boeing has cultivated is an active relationship with the U.S. Defense Department. They are the second largest contractor dealing with the U.S. defense market. The second is that Boeing's products are extremely diversified in the aerospace industry. They are manufacturing a variety of products that fulfill all possible needs within the industry. This makes them a one-stop shop for larger clients, including the United States military. Also, this diversity extends into space exploration with NASA, even providing the satellites that are being used to monitor Earth. Boeing really has diversified itself, and I just kind of wanted to walk through a couple of their products to give you kind of a sense of what they're dealing with. First they start in the commercial department. The airliners. The 737 is really their main airliner. It's a smaller jet that holds about 200 passengers, but for its size, that's pretty impressive. There's an in-between model called the Dreamliner. It's still a relatively large airliner. And that one's had its own issues, but we'll talk about that a little later. And then the Boeing has the 747, which is gigantuous. It holds about 660 passengers, depending on the layout of the seating. An impressive fact about Boeing is that even though the product is huge and expensive, they have figured out how to be very proficient in production. Boeing can actually push out 42 of the 737s in a month. So for a $90 million unit, that's pretty quick. Like we discussed before, Boeing has diversified in their industry and has really become an expert in defense aeronautics products, including 7 different types of helicopters, a few models of fighter jets, troop transportation airliners, and any new type of technology that goes with this type of product, including weapons. Boeing is very involved with military-grade missiles. These missiles actually can shoot in a 360-degree radius. They can shoot over the top of mountains and come back down and hit a cavern that's on the other side of the mountain. That's one of their newest guided missiles. So they're not only in the airline industry, this shoots from the ground, so it's not necessarily air involved in the industry. The last category is aerospace products. This is everything from satellites to spacesuits. They just came out with a new spacesuit. We'll talk about that a little later too. It's pretty safe to say that they kept up with William Boeing's habits of staying up with technology. They really do spend a lot into research and development, which brings me to my next point on their strengths. It's very important for Boeing to be involved in research and development to make sure that they're fulfilling every expectation of the market. So they really just keep up on time. As we get into the weaknesses, we started off with what we left in the strengths, and research and development for this company is extremely costly. The 787 Dreamliner, we talked about that a little earlier, it's said to be losing about $30 million every time the jet's been pushed through or sold. This is because they use titanium. So the company's been trying to eliminate the titanium usage that this airliner uses, but it's been a pretty rough battle. But the push to reduce titanium cost is part of a broader long-running effort by Boeing to make the 787 profitable. It includes pressing suppliers for price cuts and adjusting assembly lines to improve efficiency. They actually finally made a profit on this product in the fourth quarter of last year, which was pretty awesome for the company. That's quite a bit of money to lose from a product, but it was all research and development, and so Boeing really hasn't disclosed how many billions it's invested in to develop the 787, but it has spent more than $30 billion on production, tooling, and one-time costs. So that kind of gives you a feel for what they're dealing with. So more on this is production delays that happens. And then we got pension and production costs. We talked about the production costs of the 787, but pensions has actually been a pretty heavy burden on the company. They're paying way too much, and it's mainly because of the unions, and so they're trying to discuss possible changes in that. But now that we have discussed some of the internal strengths and weaknesses that Boeing presently is working with, talk about some of the external opportunities and threats that Boeing faces. Starting with opportunities, there are many other countries that are interested in creating relationships with Boeing, which presents them with the opportunity of expansion. Boeing has been appealing to countries such as Asia Pacific, Middle East, and some African regions. They actually just started a manufacturing plant in China, not for imports or anything like that. It's to capture that China market that's currently on the rise. The last opportunity is space exploration. That's always an interest. It's the final frontier. But this also, another thing that rises up is satellites. Boeing's really getting involved into satellites. But then we get into the threats. Even though Boeing is such a large company with lots of diversification, they do have some good competition, such as Airbus, Bombardier, and Embraer, who are gunning for the top spot. So it's a pretty heavily saturated competitive environment. The recent reduction in U.S. defense has created a smaller demand for governmental side of business. Kind of hoping that the new administration expands more on that defense budget. But because of the large amount of money that it takes to buy these airliners and the fact that it lasts a long amount of time, you get kind of a product saturation where companies aren't willing to buy a lot of product because they are currently saturated with the product, and they actually they base their planes off of what are called cycles of air pressure. So every time a plane takes off and every time a plane lands, it's really hard on the wings and the fins, and it starts to wear into the metal. And so instead of based off miles or hours, they base it off of how many times an airplane takes off. But you find the big planes flying for more than 20 years because they're going, across the world, less routes. So get into a little bit of what's called availability cascades. One of the big issues that Boeing had was when global warming came out. Global warming was introduced, I believe, to the media by Al Gore. he really brought it heavily into the media's hands, and this obviously affected Boeing because of their fuel consumption and their pollution. I did air quotes on that. But the company is so up to date on their stuff that they took it in a stride. They actually came out with a plan to reduce their pollution emissions, and it really did have a great effect on Boeing as a trusted company. People began to trust them even more and fly specifically on Boeing planes because they knew the company was taking that step. Another example, and this one's actually a positive one to Boeing, is they just came out with this nice blue spacesuit that you see in the picture. This spacesuit actually helps the astronauts move. They can function a lot better. This got a lot of media attention in a good way, which just helped the face of Boeing. And so the availability cascade that they took advantage of was, it's like free advertisement. The media really picked up on some of these issues, and Boeing actually took advantage of both of these and used it as a positive. So that's the end of my presentation. You can comment below, and I appreciate you being here. Thanks.